episode 6 of the Sideline Intel NBA podcast. We're coming to you with a NBA Finals preview. Jacob, did you think we'd make it this far?
I had hoped, Jeff. I had my skepticism, but I'm happy to be here.
We have 2 teams left out of the 23 that went to the bubble at Orlando. Weird to see 22. I'm getting the number 22 from Jacob. The 22 teams that went to Orlando have been cut down to just 2. As you I'm surely know, if you're listening to this podcast, it is the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers. And we're going to break it all down on episode 6. I'm Jeff Griffith with Jacob Rosenfarb. Jacob, I guess the first thing we need to talk about is your beloved Miami Heat. For those who don't know, Jacob had that pick from the jump, as he likes to say. From the beginning of the bubble, he was on the Heat bandwagon. Despite them being the 5 seed, despite them having some unheralded talent, he knew what we were getting into with the Miami Heat. So props to him. Cheers to Jacob. Jacob, talk to me.
Jeff, that was very kind. This is such a refreshing brand of basketball for the Heat. I think they really do things that no one else in the league is doing, and that's what makes it so exciting to watch. And I'm happy that is being rewarded.
What would you say, I guess, as the guy who had the Heat all along, which will now be your brand for till the end of time, as the guy who had the Heat from the beginning, from the jump, what would you say you saw from them that was better than you might have expected it to be? That was like, you knew they would be good, but this was unexpected.
I think the bench production has been outstanding. Has been even at levels that I didn't anticipate. Everyone's been talking about Tyler Hero. He's been kind of the star of this. It felt like this Eastern Conference Finals. He was phenomenal. Duncan Robinson had a rough bubble before, and he's really coming into his own. Andre Iguodala played a big series. I think the bench. I knew the bench was good. Did not anticipate the bench being this important.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting. They only really played 7 dudes in the last game. But throughout the series, like you said, they've been successful getting production from those guys. But Duncan Robinson started in the clinching game. So that says a lot about where he's come since what you said, his less than stellar seeding games in the bubble, But you're absolutely right. I mean, getting production out of a lot of these guys, Iguodala is a perfect example. He had 15 points last night, 5 for 5 from the field. Like you mentioned earlier in the playoffs, the idea of we've put dirt on Iguodala's grave. And he's not the star, 4th man on a championship team that he was for the Warriors. But, 4th, 5th, maybe a little worse. But he's not the star contributor he's been on past championship teams. But he is contributing. And it's kind of like what we saw from Carmelo. And so that's encouraging to see, especially as someone who grew up watching him in Philly. Love to see him get some opportunities in the twilight of his career. But beyond the bench, I know I'm kind of rambling right now, but beyond the bench, we got to talk Jimmy. Just how good is it to see him finally get his?
I think what's been so rewarding about Jimmy Butler making the finals is that for so long, so many of us knew that there was a different way to be a star player. Like the James Harden, the LeBron James route is very appealing and very intoxicating at times, but a star player like Jimmy Butler that doesn't need the ball all the time, that is better at getting their teammates involved, is just a different type of superstar, and it's so refreshing to see.
Yeah.
And like I just said, it's so nice to see that rewarded. And it's nice to see that he has a team around him that can kind of facilitate that sort of play style where he has a Bam Adebayo, he has a Goran Dragic, he has dudes who are taking the pressure off of him and just simply want to win. Their single focus is to win, which may have not been the case in other places he's been.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree. I think what's refreshing for me to see, kind of piggybacking off of that, is like, I think for a long time there, and a lot of it had to do with the dominance of LeBron and the dominance of the Warriors, was for a good, seriously long period of time there, it felt like you had to be a headline star to win in the NBA. It felt like it was either you're one of the guys, you're one of the elites, you're one of the names everyone knows, or you're not winning. And you're just in this second tier of player or team. And to see a team that, to put it in almost the perspective of a different sport, to see a team that's almost I'm trying to put this in the right perspective, but it's almost like, let me stop myself and get the right team I'm trying to think of here. I'm trying to go football comp.
Ooh, okay. In what way?
There's a team that didn't have the big name that was successful. You know what? I've got it.
Okay, cool.
To see a team in the NBA that almost has a similar vibe to like the early 2010s Giants, New York Giants, that never had the guy or the guys, but they had pieces that won and worked together and were successful. And it almost felt like the NBA didn't have that in its ingredients. It felt like the NBA just you didn't do that for so long now because you had the Warriors and their obvious core of great players, and you had LeBron. And I mean, you had Spurs teams, but ever since their kind of demise, it's been about LeBron's Heat and it's been about the Warriors. And of course, the 1 year he went with the Cavaliers. But you get the trend I'm referring to here. And so I just think it's exciting to see, like you said, someone like Jimmy Butler who isn't in headlines every single day. He's not a known name to every single sports fan or even casual sports fan. Like, you know who he is, but you definitely, when you're talking about the best in the NBA, you don't lump him in almost any conversation. You know, you're never talking about him as like one of the NBA's dudes. And so just seeing him be the leader of a team that works is refreshing is the perfect word, because it almost kind of gives hope to the idea that the competitiveness of the NBA can be what it was pre-Warriors again. You know what I mean?
Great point. A great point. I think you're right. A team like the Heat making it to a finals is about as in ringing an endorsement as you can for not tanking, for believing in culture, for believing in your own internal scouting. Because I do think there is kind of this myth about not myth, but the idea that tanking being the only viable route to path to relevancy without attracting superstars in free agency. And the Heat just laid out the exact blueprint for how to avoid tanking and still remain relevant.
Yes. I just want to, especially in the NBA, because like we can talk about tanking in any sport, but in the NBA, there's this idea that like you have to get the best guys when they're young because there's only 5 guys on the floor. And the only way to do that is by tanking for them rather than developing them. And not to interrupt you, but that is the big thing on top of it is the NBA specifically. It has felt like there's 2 ways to win, and it's big signings and big draft picks. And this is neither. It really is.
It's a great point. It's a fantastic, and even people who point to Jimmy Butler as a big signing. I mean, the Sixers didn't want him back. This was a man who didn't have somewhere to go in free agency to a certain extent. So I mean, this idea they built it the right. The Heat as a culture really won this one. This is less about one individual signing, less about one individual draft pick. This is about the culture that they have built and the ability to develop players with great skill sets into actually great players. Yes. And I think that's been kind of the fault of some of these. I mean, I hate to pick on the Sixers, but they are kind of the perfect dichotomy to this in the sense of that.
You're absolutely right.
Our team who came into the year with all the hype and had all the high ranking, the players that they had tanked for were now coming into their own, and like this was supposed to be their time. And a team that had an actual identity, that had some development in place, is reigning supreme in the East. And I think there's a lot of messaging in that. There's a lot of poetry in how this NBA season has gone.
Yeah, it speaks to because we have for so long talked about the disparity in talent between the West and the East, and talent won out in the West. There's no question about that. Top tier, top of your roster talent. Who are your best guys? That won out in the West. There's no question about that. You disagree?
Not to interrupt. Okay, so that's the thing. I think the Nuggets beating the Clippers is our own mini version of this in terms of that. The Nuggets have an identity. The Nuggets have some culture. They're clearly, their entire pedigree is built on development, including taking in all these second-round picks and turning them into superstars. And the fact that they were taking down the Clippers, to me, I wonder if we're having a sort of basketball revolution in terms of, hey, we really, not that it wasn't important setting a culture and getting top guys in the front office who understand that, but like, I wonder if that even becomes a higher priority now, seeing the type of teams that are winning out.
You're right. Absolutely. And I was not trying to say that straight up all of the best talent in the West won out over all the best constructed teams in the West, because the Nuggets are the obvious example, and that's awesome. And in the same vein as the Heat, I love that. My point was, though, we all know who the best player in the West is, and we all know who the best duo in the West is. And the conference that LeBron is in still was won by LeBron. And my point is not to say that that negates what teams the Heat and Nuggets are doing. I'm just saying that it's easy. It's with the talent disparity between the West and the East was the side of the coin where we could see this happen first, because there's no LeBron in the way. Like, the Nuggets competed with the Lakers, but they blew games. They didn't have the winning formula. And LeBron and AD, the two arguably best players other than maybe Kawhi in the Western Conference and even maybe in the NBA, up in that upper, definitely the best duo of players in the NBA, in my opinion. Did what everyone thought they should do, which is win. And granted, they have a supporting cast, but my point was not to discredit the team building. It was that on the West side of the coin, when push came to shove for a conference title, talent did win out. But we're seeing in a less deeply talented Eastern Conference, which has more evenly distributed talent, we're seeing what was the winning formula there. And that's where the Heat's rise is really encouraging. Because I think we'll both agree, and we'll get to this eventually more in detail, I think we both agree we expect the Lakers to win. Because LeBron against a team that doesn't have 4 All-Stars. LeBron against a team that doesn't have 4 All-Stars and doesn't have Greg Popovich coaching. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to imagine LeBron not winning these finals. He might not. We'll see. But it feels like, I guess it kind of feels like Patriots-Giants, to continue the analogy. But it still feels like, it's LeBron and AD's and the Lakers series to lose. And with that being said, I'm all over the place. But are you getting what I'm trying to say? I think just the final thing I want to add to this cacophony of thoughts is that it is also encouraging for this movement we're talking about that the only team that kicked out these two really well-constructed teams is the Lakers. If the Heat don't win,
a great point.
Is the best player in the generation, arguably, of all time. That's the only thing, in theory, that has and would, in theory, in the future, beat these two well-constructed teams. Otherwise, it was the Heat and Nuggets playoffs.
I think a great point. Exactly. And I think continuing that thought, I think this playoffs can certainly be viewed as a resounding victory for culture-built teams, for more balance, for more. And so, I wonder what kind of lessons we can learn from that moving forward, especially for all these teams that, that are waiting on this theoretical 2022 draft with the high schoolers and the college. Like, I wonder how many GMs and owners are going to take heed from this in terms of, hey, we need to spend our big bucks in development. Like, as cool as it is to get good players in the draft, what really matters is taking solid players and turning them into good players through development. You know what I mean? That's at least what the Heat are showing.
Exactly. And the Nuggets.
Exactly.
But I think, and to more concisely wrap up my point, just to make it perfectly wrapped up into a nice little ball with a bow on top, these playoffs, like you just said, showed us the power of team building, and the power of team building won out against everything but LeBron. That's basically what I was trying to say, and I think you just kind of echoed it. That the only thing that was better than really well-built teams has been LeBron. And Anthony Davis, but...
Hey, and Rajon Rondo.
And he's been balling, man. Do we go to the West?
Yeah, I think that's a nice transition, Jeff. It's a playoff Rondo.
He's been great. He has been such a revelation off the bench. How old is he?
At least mid-30s. I might go like 35.
I mean, I can think about. I mean, he was. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was a centerpiece of those big Celtics Lakers series in the late 2000s.
Exactly. I mean, he was the up and coming buck on those 2008 Celtics.
Yeah, he was like the Kendrick Nunn or Tyler Hero. I mean, he wasn't a rookie, but he was young.
Yeah.
And that's that. I mean, as a Lakers follower for yourself, that must be weird to see.
I mean, the man has posted pictures with LeBron sucks T-shirts out. If you
has he really?
Yeah. This man has been a pretty vocal LeBron hater, and only to come back now with Yeah, to get a chip with him would be quite the heel turn. But I think Lakers fans have embraced him. I think I don't know, every basketball fan, I would hope, has secretly respected Rondo's game from a distance. Even if you hated him for who he was, I think there is still a lot to love about a defense first, pass first point guard who's never going to back down. And so it's been so fun to watch this player that I've kind of, enjoyed throughout their career to come alive here in these playoffs and really been probably the Lakers' third best player.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about so much. The only question mark for the Lakers coming into the playoffs even was, back worlds ago when we were talking about, could the Trailblazers beat them? The only thing even we were talking about then was just how much are they going to get out of the 3 through 7 on this roster? The combo of Kuzma, Caruso, Danny Green, KCP, Dwight Howard, Rajon Rondo. This like bench group. You could even lump in Markieff Morris or even JaVale if you want to, but JaVale plays like 5 minutes a game. And we've seen it. We've seen plenty from each guy at different times. You can make an argument that Rondo's been the third best. At times, you can make an argument for Dwight Howard.
Yeah.
He has made timely plays, especially on the glass. Key offensive production. I mean, he only had 9 points and 9 rebounds in that game. But for Dwight Howard to be getting you 9 and 9.
And if my memory serves me, most of those came in the first half. When I believe he had like 8 and 8 in the first quarter, first half.
In spurts, he's been their third best in spurts.
So you brought it up. So I have some things I need to get off my chest about Dwight Howard.
Hit me.
I think if the Lakers lose the finals, it will be because of the karma of Dwight Howard.
Karma?
Karma. I think the way that Dwight Howard played this series with Nikola Jokic in the ability where it seems like his entire strategy was let me piss off Nikola Jokic and force the refs to do something.
Yes.
He is one of the worst, is the least favorite brand of basketball I have. That is so physically painful for me to watch. And like I just said, I think the karmic retribution is real. I really do feel like that the basketball gods watch someone doing that and think you need to pay. You need to be punished. Because it's frustrating. It's sickening to watch as a basketball fan.
So Bam's going to have 40 a night?
I worry about Bam just dropping hammer dunks and nifty little passes just all over Dwight. I
mean, he had like 30-something last night.
He was the most important player in there was that game today. He was the reason they just clinched. I think he was fantastic down the stretch. We keep on the Lakers, but back to the Heat for just a sec. The fact that in their crucial moments, they said, "Hey, we have all this talent, but we're going with Bam Adebayo. You're gonna run point. You're gonna facilitate our offense."
I know.
In our most crucial moments speaks to both the balance of this team and, like we just talked about, the development. I mean, this was a guy. I remembered this morning. Someone reminded me. Mason Plumlee was chosen for Team USA last summer over him. Mason Plumlee.
Okay, I swear, there is no sport with dumber, talent decisions that look dumber in hindsight than basketball. Maybe football with Trubisky over Mahomes, but I go back to trading up 4 first-rounders for Frank Kaminsky. The amount of what were they thinking moves in hindsight is baffling, and that's up there.
It is wild. It's Greg Popovich too. It's Greg Popovich who said we just didn't like Bam's effort, we didn't like the energy, and we just thought, we're gonna go with Mason Plumlee.
Right.
It is. The development, the steps that he has taken this season have been instrumental. Obviously, that's not shattering any news, but the reliance on him in the last couple minutes to me was a beautiful allegory for this Heat season and just kind of who they are as a team.
I agree. It's awesome.
But going back to the Lakers, I think
excited for that matchup with Dwight Howard.
Oh my God, it's going to be phenomenal. I wonder how much you're going to go with someone like maybe Markieff Morris instead, or even if they just say screw it, we're going to go Anthony Davis from the jump. We're going to play our ace in this, ace of the sleeve or whatever that analogy is. We're going to go from that straight from the jump. And I'm curious. That'll be it's a strategic chess move. If we're talking about chess moves, I'm rambling a little bit, as you like to say. But,
no, please do.
If we're talking about chess moves, I am super fascinated to see what Spoelstra does against LeBron. In terms of this was a man who watched him for 4 days in and out more intimately than maybe anyone on the planet. If there, so, what's up?
You said 4
4
days.
4 years, 4 days, years. They're
Yeah, he
all
got 4 great looks, 4 good days looking at LeBron. Yeah, that's a great skill. I went to college for 4 days. It was great.
It was beautiful. So like I said, this is a man who knows LeBron about as intimately as you could. And if there was ever, I mean, if he watched that 2011 finals when they locked him down with JJ Barea about as, you know what I mean? He was watching about as intimately as you could. And so I'm very curious to see what sort of picadillos he can pick out of LeBron's and what little tricky attacks that maybe that few other teams would be able to replicate.
I think it'll be fun. I mean, it's always the fun equation in a LeBron series is how are you attacking him? And the Nuggets had their moments, but and I think it's what you're exactly right that this is the guy to do it. Coaching wise, I don't think the Heat have the guy defensively, but they've got the coach to scheme it, and that's going to be exciting because, again, no one that could match up against LeBron that is also a good coach knows him better. So this is the coaching matchup that makes sense to at least stifle LeBron. I don't know how successful they'll be because you still have to have the horses.
Exactly.
And they've got guys, but guys who can stop this man, I'm hesitant. But, it doesn't have to necessarily just be one guy or even two. There are ways to scheme that.
Undoubtedly.
But
the thing is, you have your point is well made that they probably don't have the singular force
right
to slow down LeBron, but they certainly have the horses. I mean, I assume Jimmy Butler will get the start on him.
Probably.
But they'll go Iguodala pretty quickly, I bet. They'll go Jay Crowder very quickly. They'll go Bam, I bet, very relatively quickly. I think they got some dudes who they're going to throw at him, and they have a bunch of different styles they can throw at him.
Can we get the 2-3 again?
Ooh, I don't.
They ran some zone this series, did they not?
They ran a fair amount. It felt like it was more zone than I certainly expected. Even when Jim Boeheim's essence lives in all of us.
Everyone I know who's NBA over college hates the zone. I'm just gonna put it out there. It won.
Facts. It's facts. Jim Boeheim needs an NBA job ASAP.
Facts. No. What? No. No way. Please stop that heresy. Talk more about the Heat defense. You're making bad claims.
I think, like you just said, though, I think the zone will be an interesting little wrinkle to put into this. I wonder. I mean, the Lakers have to be preparing for it. I think you would be dumb at this point not to at least anticipate some zone from the Heat. But the reason it works for them is because they have the dudes who are able to orchestrate it. They have the length. They have the ability to get to shooters quickly. Is that you probably know this better than most? Is that the problem with the zone is that you're going to allow free shots. You're going to allow open shots at some point,
exactly.
And especially against an NBA team. You can only really allow so many open shots before it bites you, or open threes.
Right.
That's really what becomes the backbreaker. But the Heat have the length, and the Heat have the sort of defensive principles that have really kind of negated that in these short, sort of compressed little 3, 4, 5 minute stretches where they just throw it at you out of nowhere.
Right.
It can be super effective.
I mean, one of the big reasons that Jim Boeheim's teams are always so good with the zone is not just how it's coached, it's length. He recruits for length. I mean, last year, all of their starters were 6'6" or over, and the thing that people don't notice about that is that when you have that kind of length, the zone gives up open shots, but you can get a little more of a closeout when you've got that kind of length. And open shots they look more open than they are. And so you get guys out of the rhythm because they're taking shots that aren't as open as they feel like they are, and they're missing, and they're losing confidence. And then you get Michigan State in 2018 jacking 66 shots, and 40 of them were threes. That's what happens. Granted, that's a college team. That's not a LeBron-led NBA team. But in spurts, if you can get the Lakers out of their rhythm like that, that's, that even if that works once a game, that's 5 minutes of basketball where you outscore the Lakers. And if you're the Heat in this series, you'll take any minute where you can outscore the Lakers,
A great point. A very great point. So, yeah, I like we keep circling around. Spoelstra is probably the perfect coach for this situation. And I don't think there would be a more ideal person to take on LeBron, to pick at all the little nitpicks that have plagued him, I think, throughout his career. I cannot wait to see Spoelstra exploit that. and and just see what kind of horses he throws at him.
I agree. I'm pumped. I don't know if we have a ton to add on the finals. I do want to ask one question, and then I think it'll be kind of interesting to talk about some of the couple of teams here that lost. Just kind of dig into what we saw from them. But I did want to kind of sum up these finals with one question, and we can both answer it. The question is, if the Lakers win, it's because blank, and if the Heat win, it's because blank.
Ooh.
Who do you want to start with?
I'll go with the easier one. I'll go with the Lakers. I think if the Lakers win, I think it's Anthony Davis this series. If the Lakers win, I think I don't want to give LeBron too much credit, but I kind of feel like we know what we're getting out of him to a certain extent, and so that elevated that second step, that second star, how much Anthony Davis is willing to put in. That to me, that will be our defining factor.
I'm going to start on the Heat when we get to the Heat because I'm tired of you answering before me and having the exact same answer. That was the easy. It was low-hanging fruit. Come on, you're absolutely right. But what do I do with that now? I mean, all right, they got great bench production. Wow, I'm such a genius.
Okay, wait. I'll give you your 30 seconds on Anthony Davis, and I'll give you a secondary Lakers opinion.
All right, fine. I mean, you just said it though. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I think, again, there's a certain floor with LeBron that we know we're getting from him in a finals. We have never really seen LeBron play bad in the finals. We've never seen Anthony Davis play in the finals. And so while we've now gotten proof that he plays well in clutch moments, this is the height. And so I'm excited to see how high he can fly in these pressure moments, how well he can do against a guy like Bam and against other quality bigs. And at the end of the day, I think he is the variable with the most high ceiling, low floor. I don't think his floor is that low, but I think his lowest floor might lose them the series.
I mean, if he comes up with another 1 rebound game, 2 rebound games where he's not really making an impact on that and on the defensive end of the floor, the Lakers are in for a long series.
Exactly, because we can talk all we want about how he's in the upper echelon of raw talent, or I shouldn't say raw, that sounds like unpolished, but pure talent, just talent in and of itself. That's true. But the difference between him and LeBron, there's a lot of differences between him and LeBron, but the biggest difference between him and LeBron is LeBron's played in 10 finals and Davis has played in like 4 playoff series. So that speaks a lot to LeBron's quality, but it also speaks to the question mark that is Anthony Davis in the height of pressure. Guy's several years into his career now, and this is his first shot. So I'm not saying he won't do well, but I'm saying it to me is the biggest high-low question mark.
A great point. A fantastic point. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Give me your second.
Continuing along with that high, low floor, high ceiling sort of idea, I think Markieff Morris fits into that really well. I think the potential of him alongside LeBron, AD, and whatever 2 guards they want to throw out is the best possible Lakers lineup. I think that has been proven throughout this playoffs. I think Lakers fans suspected that throughout the year that Anthony Davis' center was their best lineup, and it really became confirmed this postseason. And now, as they enter the finals versus a Heat team that is going to force teams to go small, but isn't exactly a traditionally small team, someone like Markieff Morris who can play both sides, who can stretch the floor but also provide some size, is going to be even more crucial. Yeah. And so I would not be surprised if he guarded Bam a lot, if he got a lot of Bam minutes, if he got maybe some Jimmy Butler minutes. I think he's a defensive force who the Lakers are going to rely on heavily, and he's a floor spacer, which the Lakers are going to rely on heavily.
And he's also got to play a lot because of the Dwight Howard karma.
Exactly. I really do. I think the karma of Dwight Howard's coming for the Lakers. If the Lakers lose, it's because of the karma. I'm telling you.
That's what I wanted to hear. All right, and now the Heat. If the Heat win, I guess I'll start. There are a handful of kind of not obvious, but like definitely low-hanging fruits. Like, if the bench, production is there again, or if we get another great series from Tyler Hero, I'll say if they can keep it low scoring, because the Nuggets couldn't. And I think the Lakers aren't bad defensively, but I feel like it plays to the strengths of the Heat, both in the sense of they don't have necessarily someone that they don't necessarily have someone that I would bet on to put up 30. Like, they have guys who can do it, but they don't have someone to go, all right, I confidently can say he's going to put up 30 in this game. They have plenty of guys that can do it and have done it. But I think, generally speaking, when you are as big an underdog as the Heat should and will be against the Lakers, it's the age-old concept of shrinking the game. I mean, I go back to my old memories as a Syracuse fan, but the biggest reason they are so often in these tournament games that they get these big upsets in is because they're keeping it to 50s. And when there are less opportunities to score points, there are more opportunities to stay close. And I think if the Heat defensively, and Spoelstra, as we mentioned, comes into effect there. I think if the Heat defensively, whether it's because they're, utilizing different packages on LeBron, whether it's because, Bam is playing quality defense on AD, whether it's because the zone is effective against shooting, whatever it may be, whatever, different strategies they can implement to keep these games lower scoring and slow the pace down. I think if the Heat if these games are going to enter the fourth quarter in the 70s, the Heat are going to be in it. But if it's going to be in the 90s, I wouldn't be shocked to see like 95-82 entering the fourth. I just feel like the more this game gets moving offensively, there are more opportunities for the higher level of talent that is LeBron and AD to win out in the law of large numbers. And so I think there are a lot of X's and O's we could point to, but big picture, I'm saying a slower, lower scoring defensive series is what the Heat need to pull it out.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think it kind of growing off that though, Lakers are in their best, I feel like, in transition, and especially in that half transition, when like 2 or 3 guys are down the court and LeBron's slowly jogging up, but it's going to take advantage of a not really set defense. That is where the Lakers thrive.
Absolutely.
And so your point is well made that if the Heat are able to really slow that down, and I think that'd be a big part of the zone, but really slow that down, really limiting total number of shots, you're totally right. That favors them insurmountably.
Yeah. It's not even just the Heat's defensive prowess. It's also just the fact that a lower scoring game allows the favorite less opportunities to – I mean, that's just – I hate to be basic, but that in and of itself is true in any underdog scenario. I do think also it favors the Heat specifically. But
1,000%. Going a little more player specific, I cannot wait to see what Goran Dragic does. Mm-hmm. I think I've been harping on him. It feels like all playoffs. I do not think he gets the respect he deserves. I think in this league full of super talented point guards, I think we forget about Dragic a lot. We forget about all the really important things that he does for the Heat and all of the unheralded little team building activities that he does. I don't know. He's a pleasure to watch. I think it's these weak Laker guards, whether that be Rondo who stepped up, or whether that be Caruso, or Danny Green who can't seem to buy a bucket. Whoever it is, I think he has a duty to kind of exploit that matchup and get his teammates involved. And if both those things happen, I worry about the pressure that would put on the Lakers defensively, and especially on Anthony Davis in terms of if he's having to constantly clean up mistakes of Caruso, of Rondo, of KCP, then that's going to put a huge pressure on him foul-wise. It's going to put a huge pressure, a taxing sort of effect on him. I think that's going to pay dividends throughout the game if Dragic is able to really get in the paint a whole lot and really force the Lakers into tough decisions.
Yeah, I'm with it 100%. And I guess without further ado, we can probably get into predictions now that we've kind of discussed our keys here.
I think we have similar thoughts in mind, so I'm going to let you go first.
We do.
I know. It's no fun that way.
I know. I'm going to say Lakers in 6. I think at the end of the day, I think the Heat will put up about as much of a fight as the Nuggets did. An argument could be made that the Nuggets should have won 3 games in that series because they're essentially one play away from at one point leading 3-1. Or I'm sorry, from being up 2-1. Or whatever it is. They were one play away from winning one more game. And I think the Heat – it's tough because if I'm comparing it to the Nuggets series, I don't want to say the Heat have more talent because they definitely don't. But I feel like they maybe have a more effective 1 through 7. And I think they have a little more of a winning formula. I think we even saw it in the Nuggets game against the Clippers and the Jazz. The Nuggets came back really well, obviously. They erased 2 3-1 leads. But the fact they were down 3-1 to begin with says a lot about their ability to win ball games. I mean, those series both went to 7. The Heat have just snapped through teams like knife through a butter or a stick of butter. And I think they have a little more of a winning formula, and that's super basic. It's not like that's a very cliche thing to say. But I look at what they've been able to do, and I feel like them taking 2 games feels like the safe bet to me. I don't think they're gonna. I mean, it's the finals. I don't think Jimmy Butler's gonna go down without winning a couple games. I can't imagine them getting swept. I don't know. That's just my take.
I agree. I see what you're saying. And I agree in principle, but I think Lakers in 5. I think they gentlemen sweep their way through this playoffs. In that we're gonna get a crazy Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero game. I think we're gonna get some, 8 of 12 from 3 from one of them. But beyond that, I just think in a 48-minute game, I really don't trust Jimmy Butler and Bam to get the same quality of shots that I do for LeBron and AD. And while I think you're right that I think these games are going to be a little slower, I think there's going to be a little more intensity. And while that does favor the Heat on the long run, in a short sort of condensed moment, if they enter, the last 5 minutes with a tie game, I'm definitely taking LeBron and AD over Bam and Jimmy. And that's kind of what it boils down to. In those crucial moments, you're looking to a handful of guys. And I just trust the Lakers' handful of guys significantly more.
I would agree with that.
I like we keep talking about. I so curious to see what Spoelstra does, and I think that might win them. I think his genius, his game planning could single-handedly win them a game. So maybe it turns out to be 6. I would be surprised if it went 7. I feel slightly more confident in it going 5 than it going 7.
I would absolutely agree with that. Absolutely.
So I think the Lakers pull this one out. I think that this is a nice matchup for them. In that it's not that they've been exploited by theoretically poor matchups, because on paper someone like the Rockets or someone like the Nuggets should be a poor matchup, and I think we've kind of seen the Lakers be a little bit more matchup proof than people thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Lakers have the horses here. The Lakers have the dudes to kind of match up with the Heat do well, and I think Lakers in 5.
Okay. Well, there you go. Jacob Rosenfarb is going to get his first championship in 9 years, 10 years.
But so we fingers crossed, baby. We're praying over here. Maybe
we had a long discussion in our college friend group about who has suffered the most. And Jacob was up there, but he's got 2 championships as a Lakers fan. So
I can't be 2, but yeah. I think we have some more desperate fans in our. You finished 2. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think incorrectly as well. I think I'm 1. I really believe that. We'll let the fans debate. But the guy I was up against for 1 has championships he experienced from a team he no longer roots for, and that is my argument. I've never seen a championship, and that is my argument. But we're off topic. We've got more to talk about in basketball. We can let the 4 listeners decide whether or not I'm right or wrong about that. Unless you have a personal take before we move on.
I think I'm going with, okay. So the whole these championships that you're talking about that our friend Ryan saw is for hockey, right? For a hockey team, he was not that passionately into, and then later dropped allegiances to. Correct.
The man owns jerseys of theirs.
I don't know. I think calling that a championship is a stretch. I think, as we talked about,
more championships than I have. Cardinals.
It's a tough one, Jeff. You're tortured. I don't know. I don't know if you're quite as tortured as Ryan, though.
Well, either way. Point being, Jacob's likely gonna get his first championship in quite some time now. So. Congrats to you, Jacob.
Wow, that's very kind of you to say, Jeff. I wish you were saying about the Padres, but
we'll get there.
Time will tell. Exactly.
A few weeks before that, actually, they might wrap up before the NBA at this rate, with the NBA playing every 2 or 3 days. But I'm all in on the Pods bandwagon personally. I'm with you. I think that'd be super fun if they were to. I'm all about Pods on one end and White Sox on the other end. I've got friends with both, so I would love to see that pan out. But.
We digress. Yeah.
Basketball is the name of this podcast. And baseball has similar letters in it, but it's not basketball, believe it or not. So we'll go back, because I do think we should talk about the teams that just got knocked out. First of all, Deuce Tatum. What a cute kid. I felt so bad. For context, Jason Tatum's kid, right? Had this poster, and it was like, I love you, Dad. Y'all gonna win, and then they didn't. And now he has to leave Disney World. My heart breaks for this kid.
That's why you're gonna be a great dad, Jeff. Me on the other hand, I saw him holding that sign and thought this kid is going to get memed into oblivion.
And he did.
He did, exactly. This kid is gonna have the most salacious things written on that sign. It's gonna be phenomenal. So yeah, I think that perfectly illustrates the difference between us.
It does. That I feel bad for this sweet child having to leave Disney World, and you are excited about the memes of it.
I'm ready for the memes
of a 5 or under child. I don't know how old he is, but he's not older than 5.
I think 2. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Even better. That you're happy to see a 2-year-old get viciously viral on the social media. You are a wonderful, warm soul, Mr. Rosenfarb. You'd think all that chest hair would warm your heart a little more, but
it was beautiful to see. I'm glad that Jason Tatum gets to spend much more time with his son now. How about that?
There you go. That's sweet.
I support fathers at home with their children, and not like LeBron said. The bubble was not a place for kids. I'm surprised for the amount of people who came who were family members. I kind of get wives and girlfriends, but the amount of kids who were there was.
So you're gonna leave the kid at home?
Right. That is the other thing. What do you do? I don't know. Yeah,
if he's that young, I'd take him just because like it's not like making memories yet. I don't know. Like
I guess. Like if you were able to get into Disney World, I wonder. I don't know. There's a lot of talk. I remember early in the bubble when Disney World was closed. I think they went a couple times, but now that Disney World's open, I bet they weren't letting them in.
I doubt it. Yeah.
Which is that's kind of cruel. Cruel.
The funniest images were when Russell Westbrook was like yelling at the crowd, and it was just a bunch of babies on their mom's laps.
Incredible.
The baby section is the best thing about the bubble.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna miss the bubble. The bubble was great for basketball, and I obviously I really hope we're returning to some sense of normalcy sometime soon. But like if them having to redo the bubble again next year would not be the worst thing in the world to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's better than not having fans, in my opinion.
Definitely. And so, so we want to talk a little bit about these Celtics and Nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, let's think. I mean, the biggest thing we talked about with the Celtics coming into this series was this going to be Tatum's, for lack of a better word, like breakout party? And he played well, but not well enough to win. Not even close. So I one of the big things we talk about this team going forward is it's interesting how good they are, and these pieces are so young. But do you wonder if there's a cap on this specific core? Or at least, do they need more? Or do they just need to get older?
Kemba, to me, is the question mark. To answer all of that with one word, Kemba.
Okay.
I think, he, to me, he's not getting any better. This is who Kemba Walker is, and I think we've talked about this before on podcasts, but when he's their third best player, that's a really talented team. But when he's asked to be their second best player behind a on and off Jason Tatum, that's where some questions start to arise.
Right.
And so I think philosophically, I'm always against spending big money at the point guard position just because it is the easiest position to find right now.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that hampers them long term, especially when it comes to the depth. I think so much of this team's strength is kind of built on depth. In theory, maybe not this specific team because I don't think this bench is very good. I thought Grant Williams had a really nice series. But beyond that, the depth wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I wonder going forward how much they're going to regret handing out big money to Kemba when they could have, locked up Tice, locked up some of these, locked up more bench pieces, locked up more contributing pieces around Jason Tatum.
I almost wonder if you'd rather upgrade Tice, and downgrade point guard to upgrade Tice, because to me, he's not bad, but he's definitely the weak spot of their starting 5. I'd call him almost an outlier among their starting.
I think he's really good defensively. That's the thing.
I agree.
He's really good defensively. He does a lot of the small things that help you win. To me, I'd much rather replace Gordon Hayward. Not to put dirt in the man's grave, but
I'm with that.
I would not want to be the team that tries to work him through all of this. You know what I mean? I don't, that seems like you're going to put in more than you're going to get out of that experiment. And so that to me would be, I wonder if they're really thinking about how to shake things up. I wonder if they ship Hayward off, or if I don't know, they have a kind of some draft picks. They have Memphis's draft pick this year. I wonder if they try and package that into something. But yeah, they're clearly to me a piece or two away And I am curious how they try and build off that, because to me, like I just said, Kemba and Gordon Hayward are the two glaring where you would try and improve those. But if you're giving the max salary to Kemba. Kemba to me is not a max player.
Right.
That inefficiency, I wonder if that bogs him down for a while.
It could very well be. And I wonder how likely people are going to want to take him on with that contract. Right. So I almost think you have to go after, upgrading Hayward. If you're anti-upgrading Tice, I do think you look at the other three teams made the conference finals, and they all have a very good offensive big. That makes me wonder if Tice is the guy going forward. But he's a great defensive big, so he can stop those guys. He also didn't really stop Bam that much. So
defensive principles may be a little, I don't know, his defensive principles may be a little overstated. You know what I mean? I feel like we are told constantly how great defensively Daniel Tice is, and I think I agree. I think he does nice things, but some maybe, like you're saying, maybe an individual defense, maybe in the more in the truer sense of defense, or what we anticipate, he's not quite as talented as one might hope.
I think if you can turn Gordon Hayward and other pieces probably into a viable offensive but also good defensive big, and start that player with Tatum, Brown, Kemba, and Marcus Smart, that's a team that I think is built to win.
Because that's a good team. That's exactly.
Yeah. To me, while Hayward is very touchable, like in terms of moving him, and I would definitely move him for his value, the center position is the biggest upgrade needed, in my opinion. The biggest talent upgrade. Because I don't think it was like the most glaring weakness, because there are plenty of things that the other guys didn't do to win this series. But I think if you're talking about what this team needs to take its final step into what it can become around guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I think Kemba can be that piece. But I think if you're talking about rounding out this team, it's letting Tice be a great bench big behind a very talented big. Getting that person is not easy because there's only a select handful of dudes. But, we can talk to the cows come home about who it's going to be. But that's the theoretical idea I have in mind for how to get the Celtics to the promised land.
I like that a lot. And I'll give you a little taste of your own medicine, Jeff. I'm going to spring a little question on you.
Okay.
Would you rather be GM of the Celtics right now or the Bucks?
Taste of my own medicine?
Yeah, I feel like you're the question asker.
All right,
All right.
All right. Celtics to the Bucks.
Who has a brighter future in your opinion, and who with Giannis's impending free agency and everything, all the war chest that you have as the Celtics, which position would you rather have?
Oh, I will take Celtics 11 times out of 10 and twice on Sundays. That's not how that works, but whatever. I just I would rather have. The biggest thing for me when talking about an NBA team, when you play 5 dudes at a given time, the biggest thing for me is how many guys can I look at and say, I'm confident he belongs on the best version of our team. And I feel that way about 4 players in Boston. And I feel that way about 1.5 in Milwaukee. And while you have arguably the best player in the NBA not named LeBron James, you also don't have a lot else. You have Chris Middleton, and Chris Middleton is in this weird tier where he's good, but would he – I don't know. If you take Giannis out of the equation, how good is Chris Middleton? If Chris Middleton is drawing the best defender every night, what is he doing? And so I almost wonder, to me, what the Bucks need is harder to get than what the Celtics need. I guess that's the best way to put it, because the Bucks, to me, need a great number 2. I just don't think Giannis can carry the team by itself. I just don't. And I'm not saying he's completely by himself, but I would say that Chris Middleton is Chris Middleton, I wouldn't say is a ton better than some of the number 2s LeBron has had in his career. Kyrie is obviously better than Chris Middleton. But anyway, I look at what the Bucks need. The Bucks need a great second piece, in my opinion, to be on the level of or better than Chris Middleton. And even then, their bench is solid. It's not amazing. The Celtics, to me, have their winning core and just need to create something around it. To me, the Celtics have the 2 dudes that are their future, And like they have their 1-2 punch, and they even have their third and four best players that I am confident in can lead them to a championship. And it's just a matter of getting the right pieces around them that work better. And so to me, the Bucks have to make big moves, and the Celtics have to make a handful of small ones. That makes sense?
That's a great way of putting it. I couldn't have put it better myself. That's a great point. You got me thinking now. I mean, Chris Paul is a name that keeps getting thrown around. I mean, apparently Giannis went to Bucks ownership and said, "Hey, I want to play with Chris Paul."
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that manifests itself come this offseason. I wonder if the you know what I mean, the chips are already being laid down in terms of what it would cost, what kind of long term the repercussions of that would be. But yeah, I think it's a great point. I think there's definitely more drastic moves that must be taken in Milwaukee compared to a place like Boston. And so yeah. But I can't help but think those are the two competing franchises. It feels like, and for the next 10 years, if we're placing odds, those two in the Heat. It feels like in the East, maybe Philly.
And the Heat have arguably the brightest, the most clear-cut bright future, in my opinion, because not just because they won the East, but because they won the East at the beginning of most of their roster's trajectory. Like, if we're talking about like a curve of a guy's career, like from the bottom of the bell curve all the way to the top, if say the bottom is 0 and the top is 50 and then the next side's bottom is 100, it's a bell curve. I almost feel like the Heat are where they are when almost their entire roster is between like 5 and 15% of their curve. And obviously, the biggest thing you and I always talk about is trajectories. And trajectory is not linear. Progression is not linear in any sport. But these guys are already winning the East, and most of their biggest pieces are just now proving themselves. Whereas the Celtics, I feel like in terms of progression into your prime, their best pieces are more in that like 30 to 45 range. They're not all the way yet, but they're getting there. We have a good sample size of who these guys are. They've had several years to kind of put together an image and a representation of what they are as players and as a team. And then the Bucks, all of your eggs are in Giannis. And so I look at the Heat and I just think this team might not get a higher. It might not improve more, but theoretically it has the most room to improve from an Eastern Conference championship team. That, to me, is the brightest ceiling. It's the highest ceiling by far. The Celtics probably have the highest floor. Would you agree?
I would have to, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Having Giannis on your team is a pretty high floor. But sure. that will, later reveal itself. I don't know that.
Yeah.
Who knows how long that? If we're talking long term, there's a very realistic world to me where Giannis is not in Milwaukee after this season.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I also should say that, like, we need to be careful probably, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm correcting myself here. We need to be careful of the fact that the Bucks are still a back-to-back 60-ish win team, and they do have the best player, the MVP, and they just happened to flame out in a couple of playoffs. That might not be a trend. That might just be 2 playoffs where they lost. So there's a real scenario where they aren't necessarily a bad playoff team. Like, if they do this again next year, write them the heck off. Like, they are not built to win.
Giannis is probably leaving if they do this next year.
Absolutely. But my point is, it could very well just be that they caught bad matchups at the wrong time and they lost. Teams lose. It happens. Look at the Lamar Jackson Ravens last year. That team felt like it was on a beeline for at least the AFC title game, and they lost to the Titans. And the Titans aren't bad, but the Titans are like, I don't know, the Titans are like the NFL's, like, I don't even know, the Pacers. There's like this fine team that can compete but probably won't, and like this amazing team we're all so high on lost. And maybe with another year under Lamar Jackson, they don't. And maybe with another year under Giannis and some of his young bench pieces, they don't. And we very well could see them prove us wrong next year.
I hope so.
But I do think conventional wisdom does say what we're saying about the Bucks.
I couldn't agree.
Valid question marks.
And I think if we're proven wrong, it'll be because Bucks ownership really stepped up this offseason and really made it a priority to build around Giannis. And that would be fantastic. I would love to see that, just because every great player deserves to have the full faith of their ownership. And it's a little weird right now that he hasn't fully gotten that from Milwaukee. And it may be, a year too late. I think that Malcolm Brogdon signing, I think, is hanging heavy over this team. But I'm curious. I would not want to be in Milwaukee's shoes right now. This seems like a rough place to be in terms of there's so much pressure on this one singular offseason to make some drastic improvements. And I'm curious to see if they're up to the task.
Yeah. I think just real quick to go back to the original question, which was about who would you rather be the GM of? What you just said, you just said even further, it feels like another reason I'd pick the Celtics over the Bucks, because on the Bucks, I have to make the move now. The Celtics can kind of toy around with this core. They've got proof that this core wins, and they have some room to kind of mess around with it. Pick up some bench pieces, upgrade the center position, move Gordon Hayward, but they have like different options, and they aren't required to make the move, the splash. It feels like the Bucks have to, and that's a lot of pressure, and I don't like pressure. So,
no, it's a great point. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I do want to, real quick, the original question here was, what move needs to be made to make the Eastern Conference loser into a champion? Same question, Nuggets.
I mean, their number one off-season priority is going to be Jeremy Grant. I don't think there's been a player, maybe save for Fred VanVleet, who's earned them more money this playoffs. I think Jeremy Grant is about to get paid like crazy, and I think it might be a max.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I just a sense that when teams get a player they really, really want, and I could see that being with maybe that be like the Kings or the Thunder or a team that needs one of these solid developmental pieces. Jeremy Grant fits in really well with that. And so there's going to be a massive bidding war for him. And so I think that clearly becomes Denver's first priority. But I think secondly becomes the Michael Porter Jr. saga. I think there was, there are a few players in the bubble who broke out more than Michael Porter Jr.
Absolutely.
And so the chemistry that he already has with Jokic and Murray and the ability to feed off those two players, I think spells really well for the Nuggets going forward. And I can't wait to see what he does in a full season of that, in a full 82-game slate. I think he's just going to set the world on fire. And so I hope they keep it a little closer to the chest, don't make anything too radical yet, because I'm really excited what Denver has core-wise.
So you think the current roster is championship caliber?
I think in the same way we're talking about the Celtics, in that their pieces they have some movable pieces. They have some things around the edges they'd like to fix, but the core of what they got, as a champion. I think Jokic can be the best player in a championship team.
I agree.
I think these last couple games in that Lakers series were not his most resounding. They're not feeling with the most confidence. I think there are some definitely questionable sort of, and they talked about it all in the broadcast that like when you're plagued with foul trouble, when you're kind of getting bullied around a little bit, I think it's tough to get in a rhythm. And for someone like Jokic, he really relies on that. And so I think I did not lose faith in Jokic in this series, is my point. So I still do believe he can be the best player on a championship team.
If there's a move you'd make, though, what do you want to upgrade about this team?
I think somebody next to Jamal Murray. I think so. The rumored trade throughout the season was Gary Harris and a piece for Drew Holiday, and that makes a lot of sense. And so I think they maybe revisit that in the offseason, or again try and improve that second guard into either a great shooter or a great defender. Because Gary Harris does both those things average, but if they could find someone who's elite at least one of those things, that would be just a game changer for their team.
Yeah, I'm with that.
But their future is debatably brighter than anyone in the West. You know what I mean? If we're thinking super long term beyond LeBron, it's Dallas and Denver. It feels like have the brightest futures. And
it also does kind of feel like, though, that like how many years are the Nuggets gonna have to wait before they can beat this guy?
Like that is I wonder if they are the Western Conference's Raptors, who are like, you know what I mean, constantly on the edge, constantly knocking on the door, and just don't have that one generational superstar.
I mean, there's gonna be a year at some point where we actually see LeBron decline. There's gonna be a year at some point where we see him take slightly a step back or just retire.
That's my question. I wonder if LeBron would be the type of guy who's like, I don't not want to be on top. I want to be the best player in the league, and then I'm going to play with my son, and then I'm going to dip.
Right. My point is there will be a year, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be soon. Like, he has shown no signs of slowing. You know, like, he's still in year 17. He's in year 17 and is still just running the league, you know? Like, obviously, you know, took a year off, you know, last year, but, you know, but, like, he still owns the league. And I don't know if you know, here's the question we'll throw out. I'll go back to you here. I'll flip the script here. We picked the Celtics over the Bucks. Would you rather GM the Celtics or the Nuggets right now?
Probably Celtics, what we just talked about.
Exactly.
And that I do have to deal with LeBron. It's a massive factor. It's a great point. It is a massive factor in terms of a team building strategy. You know what I mean? Jeremy Grant becomes that much more important in large part because of what he can do against LeBron. You know what I mean? You have to have someone on your roster who can at least put up a fight against him. Or, you know, we saw with the Rockets. You know what I mean? It's if you don't have at least some sort of answer for LeBron, it's going to be a very quick series.
Right. I mean, like, the biggest thing we talked about with the Warriors was when the Warriors were the Warriors. And don't forget, the Warriors are still the Warriors. Like, they still have all those pieces. They'll be back next year, and they'll add a top 5 pick. So that'll be fun. But, like, right, I'm not wrong. They had everybody except for KD, right?
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's a year older. That's the thing. But,
well,
yeah.
Sure, but a year older than what? You know, they're not like 35.
Draymond's my one concern. I think Draymond is like 33. That is my thing. I do.
Okay, I'm with that. But still, you know, you're talking about a team that's going to have
they're making
Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and likely, I don't know, Obi Toppin. Like holy, that's still a great team. Anyway, so that could compete with the Lakers. But anyway, tangent. Back on topic. When the Warriors were the Warriors of the dynasty years, everything we talked about with them was like, when a team was getting good, the question was always, okay, how are you matching them with the Warriors? And now it's, how are you matching up with LeBron in the West? And we just saw them not do it. And I have to wonder how much more what they currently have can improve to be just by on its own development to the point of competing with LeBron. You know what I mean?
It's a great point.
And so I feel like if I were to be a GM of a Western Conference power, the Nuggets, in my opinion, would easily beat the Celtics in a 7-game series. I think they'd handle that series. I think they'd win it in 6. But I'd rather be a GM of an Eastern Conference team because at least I can get to the finals. It just feels like there's a wall. You know, if I were a GM of a Western Conference team, I would just constantly, you know, it's almost like, you know, at the beginning of like the pandemic, when like whenever like we'd be like getting excited about, oh, this thing, it's got canceled, I forgot. You know what I mean? Like, there's always that feeling of like, oh yeah, we have this thing coming up, and then it was not happening, or there weren't fans, and then of course everything was canceled. But like, there were those moments where you're like, I'm really excited about this thing, and then you found out it was canceled, or you knew it was going to get canceled, or just that thought in the back of your head. Whenever there's like a bad thing in your head that constantly reminds you it's true, you know, it's like that. Like, I'm the Nuggets. Any big piece I get, or any big win I get, or any big cause for inspiration I get about my team, there will always be the lingering thought in my head of like, okay, but we still have to beat LeBron. Like, we could win 70 games. We still have to beat LeBron. We still have to get past him, you know? And it's like, you can root till the cows come home for someone else to knock him out, but they won't. So I would hate to be the GM of the Nuggets right now.
It's a great point. It's a fantastic point. It's, speaks to just how freaking special he is and just how lucky we are as an NBA community to be able to watch this because, this feels like no other sports figure I have ever even really, you know what I mean? This is just, it's a different level of dominance, and it's exciting to watch.
And that also, I feel like, speaks to the differences between him and Giannis.
Yeah.
Giannis could be that one day. He could, absolutely. But he's not yet. He's definitely not yet. I mean, we just saw it. He got out in the second round, you know? There is no Eastern Conference team that is like, we're good, but Giannis. No, they just watched the Heat beat him. They watched Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson beat him in 5. So, Anyway, we can talk to Lou in the face about how much easier it is to be in the Eastern Conference. We've been talking about it since we met 4 years ago. But at the end of the day, I think we both kind of know the work cut out for them that the Nuggets and Celtics have. I guess I'll ask you if there's any team that wasn't in the conference finals and is also not named the Bucks that has a very interesting offseason ahead of it that can make moves to reach finals tier. Who is it? And how?
I mean, the first one I think the low-hanging fruit to get is the Raptors.
I was going to say the same thing, yeah.
There's so many. They have so many unanswered questions in terms of free agency.
They might have the wildest offseason of anybody.
Exactly. There's so many variables. There's so many different directions they could go. I'm super curious to see what they do there. Let's see. I'll give you a Western Conference one though as well.
Because real quick, don't the Raptors have like 4 guys ending contracts?
I think it's Van Vliet, Ibaka, Gasol, and I think it's Powell. I bet Powell's on a restricted or something like that. I think it's have a lot of Lowry. What am I saying? Lowry.
Yeah, that's right.
Lowry. So they have their whole core, their whole older core is up, and so I'm very curious to see how they deal with that.
Right.
And then if we're going west, I think the Mavs. I think the Mavericks have a very interesting offseason in terms of like your moment is right now while Luka's still relatively cheap and like this, you have a moment to kind of do something. And so with a healthy Kristaps, a healthy Luka, a healthy Dwight Powell, which I never would have guessed would have been
I know.
But he was so massive, or his loss was so massive. And so I'm very curious to see how they approach this offseason in terms of the sort of the intensity they sort of work with and how much do they realize the kind of moment they're in.
Right. They need a piece, I feel like, though.
Oh, undoubtedly. They need some wing, the wing clear. As much as I love Dorian Finney-Smith, he probably shouldn't be starting on a playoff team.
Sure.
And so I'd love to see them upgrade that position in terms of.
Do you think they're one of the teams that chase Jeremy Grant?
Yeah, exactly. As we're talking, that it makes a whole lot of sense. That's a great fit for him. I think I would love to see what the Mavericks do in terms of defensive minded, something around Luka, because clearly I don't know. Even based off last season, they are in such a different place and where they think they're headed.
Yeah.
In terms of this is a Western Conference Finals team next season. Easy to me. They are that talented, and so I especially if they add a really nice piece.
Yeah. Do you think they could offer Tobias Harris, please?
for a bag of chips and some.
No, for like 3 firsts. Please, he's like $1,000, like $1 billion contract. Anyway.
It is wild. I think if we're continuing about interesting off seasons, there may be no we're truly there may be no more interesting one than the Sixers. I think.
First of all, who do they hire? I think D'Antoni.
Yes, are you aboard the D'Antoni train? Are you all?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I mean, he'll have the best center I think he's ever had.
So that's my question. If you hire D'Antoni, do you not trade Embiid? Like, would they not? Like, my point is, D'Antoni's system would theoretically fit super well to me with Simmons at center. Like, if I would assume, and I assume that's what he would be pushing for. Like, that fits him to a T. Sure. And the value on Embiid, I don't know. I wonder what you could get. I wonder if the kind of pieces you would want for him would actually.
I would still argue that's the best big D'Antoni's had.
Undoubtedly. I think you're. I mean, he had that. Yeah, he had Dwight Howard for those couple years in LA. Or that 8 games in LA. But yeah, I think you're probably right. But my point still stands about system fit and how much is D'Antoni going to come in to Philly if that's where he gets hired and say, hey, yeah, I know I just got embarrassed by Houston, but I promise this will be different. This will be the time that's
right.
Work. I wonder. That'd be super fascinating. I don't know, especially because, like I just said, Simmons you couldn't build a better piece in the lab for a D'Antoni built system than Simmons at center. And so I wonder how creative they would get.
You know who I'd hate to be? The next coach who comes into the Rockets and has to figure out what to do with that tiny lineup.
Oof.
You almost have to play the D'Antoni system to a degree.
It's a good point. They really do.
Or pick up some big.
It is curious that they kept D'Antoni, or they fired D'Antoni but kept Morey.
I know.
Thinking about it now, those two almost feel so linked so linked that how would you get rid of one without the other?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if they're a secret rebuild candidate, a secret, let's get as many picks as we can while these guys have some value.
Yeah, could be.
if you're able to offload Russ right now, you know what I mean? If you're able to send Russ to some desperate team, and even Harden to a greater extent, if you're able to get a package you really like for Harden, I wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger.
Where do you want Russ to go?
I mean, the sicko in me wants him to go to New York and just play on the Knicks and just put up like 28 a game while the team sucks.
Yes,
that would be really fun to watch as a hater. But if he's actually going to win, like, I'd like to see him in a place where he feels like he doesn't have to take every shot and he feels a little more in control. I don't know. I mean, there was long rumors of the Heat like that. Yeah. And after seeing this, I wouldn't want him. I wouldn't want to screw up what you have. But, like, in theory, you know what I mean? But I wonder if he goes somewhere like Phoenix. Like, what if he went to Phoenix? You know what I mean? And just
what about Dallas?
Man, I would not want to take the ball out of Luka's hands. But, yeah, fair. I'm looking for desperate teams that need a splash. That would be the team. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if
make a lot of sense then.
Yeah,
low key, 6 should make a lot of sense. I think they need to retool, but I think after how long they retooled for, I think this front office still feels like they need to be successful now to, like, appease their long-suffering fans. You were bad for a reason, and now you've hit this wall. I almost feel like that's the kind of piece they want to try to go after because they feel like they need to build a winner now.
Russ and Embiid on the same team would be
freaking hilarious.
Now that you brought that up, I want that more than anything. That would be just wild.
Yep. Fighting with each other on the floor. Yep.
Yeah, just a straight up fist fight. The other team's playing 3-on-5 or 5-on-3 because Embiid and Russ are just fighting.
Bingo.
That's funny. I want that reality now. Yeah, I think it's going to be a jam-packed and an NBA offseason. I'm very curious to see how COVID hopefully doesn't affect any. You know what I mean? But I think there will be some repercussions, unfortunately, in terms of and like logistical issues like that. But hopefully, we get an action-packed offseason once again.
I'm with it. I think we can call this one a podcast. Do you think so?
I think you're right. I think we've hit on basically. I can't imagine what else we would really need to hit on.
Yeah, we've covered the whole league basically. Any thoughts on the Grizzlies and the Pelicans?
Yeah, Lonzo coming back to the Lakers. You heard it here first.
All right, I'm with it. They're gonna get that much better. Awesome. team up with LaMelo in the state of California.
It's all a squad, if we're being honest.
But I'm with that. But I think we've covered all the bases. So, Jacob, always a pleasure.
Right back at you, Jeff. Can't wait for these finals. I worry we're a little too right. I worry that it's Lakers. I hope the Lakers aren't as dominant as I fear they may be.
I want to go 7.
Right. I want a great series. And I think we're going to get one, even if it just goes 5 or 6.
Yeah, I want good games at least. Yeah, even if the Lakers win 4 of the first 5, I want good games. So, but I think we're on the same page as always. So we'll wrap this one up. Remember to follow along at Sideline Intel on Twitter and Instagram. Follow along sidelineintel.com. And, of course, check us out on Spotify, etc., Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there, so check us out. YouTube as well. And follow Jacob and I on the Twitter and all of any socials. But thanks again for listening to the Sideline Intel NBA podcast, and we will catch y'all